I was diagnosed with diabetes 44 years ago with type 1 diabetes.
How does this affect you on a day-to-day?
Every day is sort of the same because diabetes is very much routine, but with different outcomes. It's very unpredictable. So I stick to the same sort of routine every day. You wake up, what's my blood sugar level? You test, you inject, you eat, and that carries on throughout the day. It's very much high monitoring to make sure your blood glucose level stays in range. I'm a little bit obsessed about it and stressed about it, to be honest. But day to day, you can do the same thing every day and you have different results because blood glucose is affected by so many other things. It's not just food, it's stress. The weather can affect it. It's a really difficult condition to keep in range.
So you mentioned that you were diagnosed 44 years ago, so you would have seen some changes in the way things are monitored. But when you were at that age and you were a young girl then, how did that impact your teenage years?
To be honest, I can't remember too much about that, which is probably a good thing. The big difference now is that in the last 7 years or so, we've had continuous glucose monitoring, which if you've not come across that, you wear a sensor which reads the interstitial fluid in your body, and you get a result of how much glucose is in your blood every minute of the day, which is fantastic, and also quite a pressure because then with that information you need to keep it in range as much as you can, because that is how you're going to avoid complications. That's how you're going to keep really well. And when I was 15, we didn't have such a thing. We had to test our blood sugar levels by using our urine and putting little drops of urine in a test tube. It makes me sound really old, doesn't it? And they would fizz up with a reagent tablet, and you would be able to tell how much excess sugar you had in your body. So things have moved on greatly since then, even as much as the injections, because back then you would have a big syringe with a big needle. Now they're little pens with a 4mm needle, which is it's not totally painless, but it's pretty much, it's not the worst thing. People always think that the worst thing is, how many injections a day do you have? 5, 7, 10. It doesn't matter. The injections are not the difficult thing. It's the balancing of your glucose levels, keeping it in range.
Do you think people have got an understanding of diabetes from type 1 to type 2, or do you think people are not educated on it really?
No, I don't think people do understand the differences between type 1 and type 2. Often I'll read reports in newspapers. They're reports about largely type 2, which is the majority of the population. About 90% of people with diabetes have type 2. Sometimes that's genetic, sometimes it's lifestyle, sometimes it's just bad luck and there's no reason for it that can be found. And it's quite a different condition to type 1. The complications are the same because the causes of whatever causes your body to be depleted of insulin, which is what we need to process the glucose in our diets. Whatever the cause of that, the outcome of having too much glucose in your blood is the same. Blindness, amputation, heart disease, kidney disease, nerve damage. They're really horrible complications, which is why I work so hard to avoid that. But people generally think it's often brought on by yourself. You've eaten too many sweets when you were a kid. Why should they know any different? It would be quite nice to get the message out so that more people are aware of of how to look after themselves to avoid type 2 in the first place, and also to understand that those with type 1, which is an autoimmune condition, there's nothing you can do to prevent it, sadly, or cure it, to make them more aware that, yes, somebody recently said to me, oh, it's not cancer. No, it's not. Thank God it's not. However, it's a high maintenance death sentence. That's how I look at it on a bad day, because you have to spend so much headspace trying to manage the condition psychologically, physically, mentally. It's quite a big ask, actually, and people don't see that. I often get told, oh, you don't look like a diabetic, whatever they look like.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting statement for someone to say, that you don't look like a diabetic, because as we know, a lot of disabilities are hidden.
Exactly, yes, exactly, and that's quite an assumption to make, isn't it? I think people assume somebody with diabetes is going to be overweight, struggling to walk. They don't see people who have been living with the condition, some since babies. It's a normal life for us. I get a lot out of meeting up with other type 1s on the island. We have a regular yoga session funded by Diabetes Jersey, who are so supportive. And we all meet up and we all have a good chat after yoga, and we realise that we all have the same sort of problems, and it's normal for us. It's quite reassuring to know that other people have done exactly as you have done to try to keep well, and it's just gone totally wrong for no good reason.
So you mentioned there about the yoga, and I believe there's a type 1 support group as well. Do you think the peer group community is a good way of supporting each other locally?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not for everybody. Some people do like to keep to themselves, and that's also fine. But I think we do enjoy getting together. Having a moan about it is quite good, and also little tips. Just how different ways of people reacting with how do you treat your hypos. Some people will not eat jelly babies because something else works better for them, but we all have a little discussion about that. Or of course, if you're vegetarian, you're not going to eat a jelly baby. So we have all these little discussions, and things like travelling, how you shouldn't be going through x-rays with your equipment, and often people, we hear stories of people being stopped and being treated a little bit roughly because they know they shouldn't go through the x-ray with their equipment, and they're being told that they have to.
Do you carry a card or identification to say that you are a type 1 diabetic as well? Just I'm thinking for medical purposes, but also through, as you mentioned there, for travel. Is it something that you identify with?
Yeah, absolutely. I always wear my Medical Alert ID. I've got my gym version here. Yeah. Yes, I wouldn't ever leave the house without having that on, just in case, because as we've said, it's unseen. You can't tell you're ill. If I was in an accident, nobody would actually know by looking at me that I could be in danger of having low blood sugar. So it's important to have that, and also you can look as if you're drunk sometimes if you're having low blood sugar. So people might just walk over you, but instead you're going into a hypoglycemic coma, which would be a bit of a problem. Yeah. Also, I always leave the house with jelly babies, cereal bars. I've usually got a banana in my bag. I've got a little picnic with me all the time, and you do need to snack on these things if you suddenly your blood sugar drops and you can't hang about. You need to have some carb.